Welcome to The Real Story with Jeanne Ives. Again, this is my podcast where we connect the dots on policy, politics, and politicians that put those in place from the federal, state, and local level. Today on my podcast, it is a thrill and a privilege to have with me State Senator Darren Bailey, who is running for governor of Illinois on the Republican side. Darren, welcome to my podcast.
Well, it's an absolute honor to be with you, Jeanne, and especially embarked on this journey after I worked hard to help you in the endeavor, and hopefully we can bring restoration to the state. So together.
Absolutely. I mean, the Illinois is ripe for change. I mean, we've honestly have one of the worst records on any metric that you want to measure, from whether it's taking care of our most vulnerable, those with developmental disabilities, or whether it's our fiscal situation. We're just not achieving as a state, and yet we have wonderful assets in this state.
Yeah, and it's absolutely amazing because everywhere we go, people know what the problems are, and but everybody's asking for more money. And, we have to realize the answer to our problems is not real money. The answers to our problems is common sense government, common sense business people coming to the table and cutting what doesn't work and holding people accountable and making the process transparent. That's how we fix our state. And, after this last budget ordeal of $46.5 billion, it's just sickening to see that the Democrat mindset and the model for Illinois is to throw more money at a problem. It just simply doesn't work.
Well, let's start with that, because I know you just came off of the budget vote that went down into the wee hours of the morning on Saturday of last week. And essentially, it's the same thing that they've been doing for at least a decade, which is cobbling together a plan that they did behind closed doors without transparency, and then throwing it at you with 2 hours to look at, thousands of pages of language. Did anybody really, and including the Democrats, know it was in that bill?
Well, they actually did not, because I actually stood up at about 1 a.m. in the morning and asked them that as we were debating the process. I stood for about a minute asking anyone who has read this budget in its entirety, and actually that did not happen. And the sad part of it is the repercussions that we're probably going to see, as you well know, afterwards. We're going to see things come up after July 1st. We're going to see things pop up probably after January 1st that were in the budget that nobody said anything about, that are going to come to fruition. It's never any good. So no, nobody knew.
Well, on top
and we're
of that,
still receiving information as to what's in the budget, by the way.
So I find it shocking. Less than 10 years ago, I sat down there in Springfield for, voting on budgets. You weren't there at that time. But we were talking about budgets that were $32 billion, and now we're at $46.5 billion. So over a 50% increase in less than a decade when we've had record outmigration. How do they explain that? Did anybody bring that up in debate on the Senate side?
So that's some of the things that's not being talked about.
Okay.
Yes, we talked about the fact that, as you suggest, in 2017, what raised my awareness to Illinois government is the fact that when the 2018 budget was being debated, and you debated that quite well, and at that point in time, 2017 budget was $32 billion, and just over the last 4 years, we have had an infusion of over $35 billion of new money, new taxpayers' money, and yet no one at any given level can sit and look and say this is better anywhere. It's worse. They don't want to talk about the issues that every legislator received a $2,500 pay raise. They don't want to talk about the fact that over $200 billion was infused into our economy from ARPA money, and over $20 billion given directly to the Illinois government. Yet our unemployment insurance, everything is just a muck now.
Sure, and if we don't pay back that unemployment insurance fund in a timely manner, one, we're accumulating tens of millions of dollars of interest charges to the federal government. But then on top of that, if we don't figure that out, the only solution is to cut unemployment benefits for those who really are in need of them when they lose their job, and they've paid towards those benefits, by the way, or tax employers more. Right. To shore up the program. I mean, neither one of those are good options in the state.
Well, in Illinois, you're probably going to have to do both. So,
yes. Well, it's a sad statement.
It is.
I mean, I pulled the budget. I got some analysis from some friends, and I tell you what, some of the garbage in here, there's no way that we should be spending money on this stuff when we have other budgetary needs. I'm just shocked. I mean, St. Sabina Church got money. Nobody knows what these people do. What's the Ebenezer Community Outreach Program? How about Black Men United? What do they do? Nobody knows. The city of Waukegan, and $500,000 there, $1 million there. I mean, nobody knows what this does. We're paying for with ARPA money. ARPA, that's COVID money, right? Is that COVID money?
That's free money. That's our
free
money. That money is money that, number one, we paid into the coffers, and number two, we're going to have to pay back, because as Illinois spends it and wastes it, we're going to create a deficit for years to come because of the fact that we did not use this money wisely in paying down the many debts that we have.
So here, Arlington Heights, who is going to get the new Bear Stir program. Oh my gosh. Well, they're getting from ARPA funds, which is my understanding are COVID funds.
Yes, that is correct.
They're getting $400,000 for drainage improvements and $445,000 for storm sewer improvements. Why? And I just picked them out of the blue. I could pick out any number of people that are getting money out of the blue that has nothing to do with COVID, and it's your money that they're spending. Arlington Heights has more than enough property tax wealth to tax their own residents for stormwater improvements.
Yeah, and I'm glad you bring this up, because one of the cornerstones to our administration as I talk about how we're going to handle this.
Yes.
I talk about a zero-based budget, and a lot of people say, "Hey, I don't think you can do that." Well, when you put wise, knowledgeable people with a backbone over these agencies, and they hire. I love that. I've been pretty politically naive a lot of my life until I realized that, gosh, I got a constitutional obligation to be involved. And when I heard President Trump years ago talk about the swamp, I'm gonna be honest with you. I thought he was talking about career politicians who had been elected for 20 or 30 years. Only now, as being in Springfield, to discover, no, it's the people there day in and day out, the people that a governor maybe appoints. To head up agencies. Illinois State Board of Education, people are shocked continually when I tell them those positions are appointed by the governor. So a governor bringing in, with your help, with other people, bringing in the right people over these agencies and having them go through and then, draw up a budget to find out what Adam Niemerg, my successor,
Yes.
He asked for a forensic audit. He submitted a House Joint Resolution asking for a forensic audit. He was immediately, literally upon administering the bill to be written, he was immediately called by Frank Montino, the Auditor General, and told that the corrupt Auditor General, that said, Adam, you can't do this. And Adam's like, well, why can't I do this? It's going to take 9 years, and it's going to cost in excess of $250 million to tell you and I what our money's being paid for. And as you suggested, there's
That's
things in there, and we don't even know
phenomenal.
how long some of that stuff's been in there. How many years have a lot of this stuff been funded? And what are they? So accountability and transparency. We need to be able to show Illinois what's being paid for, and if it's working or not. And if it's not, get rid of it and move on.
Well, it's phenomenal, because a lot of your, in full disclosure to my listening audience here, I have endorsed Darren Bailey for governor. He is the right choice in my mind, but I'm having to sit down with him, just like I have had other politicians in on my podcast. We're having a big policy discussion right now, but what's important here is that your experience matters. Truthfully, there's a number of people that are like, we don't need another politician to take on another political job. No, actually, Illinois is a fairly complicated state, and it's important for people to understand how it works in concert with local governments and the state with the federal government. And there is something to be said about having some experience before walking in cold to a governorship and not knowing how anything even works.
Right.
And we don't even need to do those silly quips of like they couldn't even find the bathroom. Sorry, they couldn't find their way around the ILGA website to determine anything.
Thank you.
And so I think
Right.
experience matters here. And so just like you're saying, you know a lot of stuff, and you know where to find nuggets of information to make the state better than I think the other candidates personally. I'd like to turn to another part of your experience, though, that I'm very impressed with, and that's the fact that you farm over 12,000 acres of farmland. Now, a lot of folks in the suburbs want to pretend like Chicago and the big financial institutions are the economic engine of the state of Illinois, but that is actually not true. We are an agricultural state, first and foremost. And a lot of our industry is built off of the agriculture that is grown here,
Right.
whether it's food processing, whether it's actual food products as well. It's all, with the commodity markets in Chicago, all of it is really related to agriculture. Is that not true?
No, that is exactly true. And unfortunately, and again, to that point, Cindy and I have 4 children. We're blessed that our 3 sons came back to operate Bailey Family Farm. We have a Christian school, so our daughter Abigail co-administers that with Cindy. And then along with that, we have 11 grandchildren. So in southeast Illinois, where I come from, looking at the opportunities and realizing in 2017 with these continued tax increases, what are the the possibilities of my grandchildren having to move outside of the state? I love Texas and Tennessee and Florida, but I have no intention of going down over Easter and Thanksgiving and Christmas to, visiting my grandchildren and my family. I want to keep them here in Illinois, but that is what is happening. Our children are going to colleges outside of our state because they're cheaper, and guess what happens when they go to colleges outside of our state? They stay outside of our state because the opportunities, and especially in agriculture, are in Missouri and Iowa and Indiana, and they need to stay here, but we're slowly letting them leave us. And so absolutely, we need to recapture that, bring that back, because Illinois is an agricultural state. And if we don't believe that, and if we don't focus on that, and if we don't talk about it, and if we don't do things to try to save that, then indeed we are going to lose it, and we're just going to continue to lose population.
Well, and Americans like to have this idyllic idea about the family farm and keeping it together, and they want it to happen. But increasingly what you're seeing are corporate farms. And it's one thing to be a family farm that's incorporated. You do that for a lot of reasons. It's another thing to be a corporate farm where you have a contractor coming out and doing the farmland, farming it,
Right.
but you've got the people that own the actual land and the goods off of it to many degrees. They're living in New York City.
Right.
They're not living on the
right.
farm. And you know what?
Right.
Family farms matter.
Right. And I'd like to bring some clarity. I'm glad
Okay,
you mentioned
absolutely.
this. The USDA, there's farm program benefits.
Yes.
Those farm program benefits to the farmers amount to about 0.5% of the USDA budget. Most of the USDA budget goes to food stamps,
Yes.
and much of it goes to forestry. A lot of people don't realize that. So I want to bring clarity to the fact that farmers don't receive paychecks every year just for farming. That is a complete fallacy. Anything that comes, last year we had an amazing year. On my farm of 12,000 acres, we've got about 300 acres of set-aside program. That's ground that we use for filter strips. And interestingly enough, much of that doesn't even come from taxpayer-funded dollars. Much of it comes from Quail Unlimited or Pheasants Forever. These groups come in, and then we sow habitat, to increase the quail or the pheasant population. So there's, it's really easy to look at the USDA programs and see these farmers, because farms are growing in size. Farms are growing in size
Yes.
because the next generation isn't staying. They're seeing more opportunity. Farming's hard work, and farming's
really
a lot of
hard
risk.
work.
And they go to other states, and then so therein lies the real threat. So Farmer Joe here has his farm that maybe has been in the family for 3, 4, 5 generations. So then he will rent that out if his children don't want to farm. But the reality, and because of the risk of farming and the true purpose of the USDA program payments, is to kick in whenever income falls below cost of production, when we have bad years, when we because of weather, because of drought, maybe even flood, or
right.
because the prices fall because of a demand, or because of imports and exports, of which the federal government is responsible for. So that's really the true purpose, to keep the cost of food the cheapest of anywhere in the world here in the United States, and to keep food plentiful.
Okay, so I want to go there for just a moment, but I want to remind people that you literally have big, wealthy people who live in New York City who collect farm benefit payments from the federal government.
Right.
That is what's happening. That is not what Americans really wanted. They want those family farmers that live there, work in the community, provide lots of resources for the community, by the way, volunteer, do all sorts of things that we expect of communities to do. We want our farmers to live on the farm. That's what we want. And the last thing we want is the Chinese purchasing any more farm ground in the United States, which is happening.
It's happening and almost accidental, because many of the Chinese will come in and they'll buy these large grain exporting companies and elevators, and many of these elevators have this desire for farm to fork. They'll own the processing business, they'll own the packaging businesses. So what better way to come in and cut an agreement with the farmer, say, let us buy your farm ground and we'll give you a lifetime agreement to rent our farm. And that's how it's happening, and it is happening. Not at the alarming rate that I see yet that's concerning, but the fact that the door's open and that door needs to be closed to limit foreign investment or even outside investment to Illinois property. I mean, I know it's great to be able to, someone in New York City to sell commercial property and come and buy farm ground and drive up the values locally. That's a wonderful thing, but at the end of the day, you're exactly right. It's not good for our economy.
And I've also, noticed that a lot of farmers, it is hard work. And if your kids do not want to continue that family farm, what do? You got lots of 1,600 acres worth of farm ground, and your kids don't want to do it. What they're also starting to do is turn it over to a solar field. So they're taking really good American farm ground that's in Illinois, and they're putting in a solar field. And I like to remind people, solar in Illinois is like growing a pineapple here. It doesn't work.
That's good.
So, I mean, that is the other thing that's happening, because farming's a very risky business. It's very difficult. You have to have a lot of skill sets to do it. You got to know the commodity market. You got to be a small business owner. You better know a little thing about fixing equipment and machinery.
A weatherman.
You better know about weather. You got to know biology, right? You got to understand plant science. I mean, there's a lot to farming, and so you bring a lot of experience in, and I think that we need that type of experience right now in state government. But back to inflationary pressures, and here's where I'm going to get to, because the Wall Street Journal just, and everybody's been saying it, so it's not just them, but I read it, 8.5% inflation year over year from March 21 to March of this year, 8.5%, largely driven by energy and food prices. So speak to that to some degree. Speak to the issue with fertilizer. That is getting very costly. And there's a global market for fertilizer, you were telling me earlier. How does that impact us, and what can we do about it here?
Yeah. Well, all of this really is a little bit of a conundrum this year, because last year here in the United States, we had a banner production year. And typically when you have a banner production year, you see commodity prices fall. That didn't happen. Actually, commodity prices continued to rise because foreign entities are buying our grain, i.e. China and others. So, there is a concern as to, the rolling stocks, and USDA is a complete mess at that, because that also drives prices. Today they'll come out with a monthly report and tell us what they have, and then next month it'll be, millions of tons different. And it's like, where did it go, or where did it come from? Where there's never an answer to that. So there is a concern that we're not getting answered on where is the food going. Where are these? Most of our corn and soybeans that we grow here in Illinois are used for animal feed, and then soybeans are used for biodiesel, and corn is used for ethanol. And
and the Biden administration wants to use more corn for more ethanol in the wake of the energy crisis, which is really the wrong thing to do, because you're going to steal from food, corn that could go to food stock. Right.
So backing up to the solar panels, then we'll get to the high fertilizer prices. Okay. But, a lot of people need to realize that Illinois already imports about 15% of our energy. So I have a coal-fired power plant in my district to Newton, and in its peak it would produce 600 megawatts of electricity, and it would employ about 400 people. It's going to be closed on or before 2027, probably before. It's being replaced by a battery field to collect, to harness the energy from these area solar panels. This battery field will produce 80 megawatts for 72 hours. And then it takes time to recharge. That's what we're being left with. That's what we're being left with. I want to make sure that...
That's a joke.
It is a joke. And I want to make sure...
Can you say that again? Say that again.
Newton Power Plant.
You're moving from 600 megawatt facility with Illinois coal.
Right.
To 80 megawatts every 72 hours, and then it has to recharge.
Correct. Yep.
That math doesn't work.
Right. And you know what else is going to happen? They're probably going to disassemble this plant, and they're going to send it to China. And
Yes.
China's going to rebuild the plant, but they're not going to put the scrubber up. So the interesting fact is that these scrubbers are efficient and they work.
Yes, they do.
The interesting reality is we're going to continue to buy our products from China. We're going to let them now produce more and more with true dirty energy, because they are doing nothing to keep the air clean. But we're going to feel wonderful about it here in the United States of America, because we are, but we're not producing anything. That's the net result of what we see coming down with all this energy policy.
Yeah. Well, and your colleagues passed the Illinois version of the Green New Deal last August.
Right.
And that's a problem as well. Not only did it bail out Exelon, and I am pro-nuclear. I'm just
Right.
not pro-bailout.
Right.
It was the second one in the matter of 5
Right.
years. They never proved up. They never budged off of their number either.
Right.
That $700 million. They never budged off of that number. They never even came down to half of that.
Right.
They just said we need it if we're going to keep these plants open. They basically held everybody hostage
That's
over
exactly
this
right.
because we do need our nuclear power.
is exactly
And at the
right.
same time, they so mistakenly said we're going to cut down our Illinois coal plants. I visited a coal plant. I went down 1,000 feet down, 7 miles out to the face of a coal seam, and I'm claustrophobic, so it was a little bit concerning, but I made it through. And actually, it was very comfortable to be down there. I was surprised. And you know what? 100% of the coal that's produced in that coal facility leaves the state of Illinois. Yeah. And in some cases, that coal will go across the border to another state. And when we're short energy, the coal plant in the other state will push energy back to Illinois with our coal, but we won't allow that energy to be produced in the state of Illinois. We're going to buy it from another state when we're short, and it's the same coal that produced the end energy. I mean, this is insanity.
Yeah. And the energy bill, by the way, we're enacting eminent domain to make sure that we have a power line that will connect Missouri and Iowa with Indiana, so that we can, like you said, so that we can pipe energy from coal-fired energy from out west to out east. And when I stood up, because I have 2 counties in my district that are affected with that clause, and property owners do not want that because it devalues the property.
Let's take that down just a little bit here. So eminent domain means that they are essentially, they're going to tell you and your private property. Think about this if you're a suburban homeowner, right? They're going to tell you that your private property must allow another private company, not even the government, a private company to go ahead and erect a massive structure on your property
for
somebody else's benefit.
Right. Federal law demands that they pay a reasonable price, but that wasn't talked about. But exactly for utilities, for energy. So I argued on the floor. I said this is not benefiting us whatsoever. And my answer from across the aisle, well, it might someday. We might need to plug into that and harness that energy to be able to use. I mean, that is the mindset that we're dealing with here.
So suburban folks, this is akin to letting AT&T erect on your property a massive 5-foot by 5-foot box just to provide Comcast cable service to your neighbors. Even if you don't want Comcast neighbor, you're going to be the one suffering and having it on your land. I mean, that is about what they were trying to do in Wheaton about a decade ago. And that's the same thing. They want to site all of their other equipment in and near your vicinity. Now, I am extrapolating a little bit. I'm saying it's going on your land. In your case, it is going on your land.
And it's more like a 40 by 40, and it's several pieces for these highline wires. It's massive.
It's massive. It's a massive intrusion. But it would be similar to somebody in the suburbs being subjected to a big, huge, ugly green box placed in the middle of their yard. And they can't say a damn thing about it. I mean, this is wrong. It's just wrong from the get-go. And all the Democrats signed off on that policy.
They sure did, and some Republicans did.
Yes,
so don't forget that.
Absolutely, and some Republicans. I mean, I know you've fought against our own party on bad policy, just like I did.
Well, you mark my words. And this was pushed out as we're saving jobs. We're saving nuclear jobs. No, there were no nuclear jobs. We can't function without nuclear energy. But what's going to happen is that in about 4 to 5 more years, this same problem is going to be back on the table. And any of the nuclear workers and know that. It constantly comes back. We fixed everything now. No, there's no fixing, because when you continue to toss the money like it's been tossed, the solar, the wind energy, we're not doing it.
Right.
This isn't fair to the
well, and
Illinois
actually,
consumer.
if they need this power, honestly, it needs to be solved at the federal level, because Exelon's a major producer of nuclear power, and as much as you say that we import 15%, we also export some of our energy across the lines. We're part of that larger compact that reaches out to the East Coast. And so when you're looking at baseload power, that should be solved when they're actually doing their 3-year deals on baseload power. That's where that money could come from, because it's providing support even not just for Illinois ratepayers, but for everybody. And so the idea that we're bailing out power in Ohio on the backs of our ratepayers. That's what that bill did. And at the same time, I like to remind people that when this bill, Exelon got bailed out in 2016, at that same time, just the year before that, they argued against a similar bailout for a competitor in Ohio. So there you go. I mean, they don't want to play by the rules at all.
But to your point with fertilizer, it's really the same.
Yeah.
It's really the same point. We've had an amazing year. Farmers were well off, and here we are. Our price goes up for our commodities about 50%, and now we are looking at almost equipment cost, part costs, replacement parts, fuel costs have doubled. Fertilizer prices have doubled. A lot of people don't realize that mainly because of EPA restrictions and guidelines. Much of our fertilizers, especially our nitrogens, they're produced in China. Yeah. So China produces that, ships it over here to us, and everyone's trying to, the question is, why the price increase? Because we're still growing the same amount of corn and soybeans and wheat. And as a matter of fact, we have a problem over here in Ukraine trying to figure out if they're going to get to plant their crop. So many things many indicators lead to some of these prices should be dropping instead of rising. So a lot of interesting questions here on the world front that I don't know. But the bottom line is, why aren't we producing this stuff in the United States of America? That's the question.
That's right. And why aren't we producing it right here in Illinois?
Right.
Well, we kind of know why we're not producing in Illinois, right? We've got some regulatory issues. We've got tax issues. We've got bad governance. There's corruption tax that we pay as well. A couple things more that I want to cover with you in this short time that I have you here. One, how important is it for people to be able to decide for themselves whether or not they want to wear a mask? Do you think that's something the government should be able to dictate? Is that something they should be able to tell us?
Right, absolutely not. So I want to remind everyone that back in May, so my
2020.
birthday of 2020, my birthday's on March 17th. St. Patrick's Day, March of 2020 was the primary day, so that's when I won the primary. The establishment put someone up against me, and even in that Senate race. Okay. And we defeated them handily. So, but that was the first day of the lockdowns. If you remember, that many people were coming, and there was some sickness taking place in Chicago, and it was all because people weren't wearing masks, and they had socialized the weekend before, and so that was the first day of the lockdown. So I actually, as a state, as a very connected state representative in my district, and I followed a lot on our Facebook page. I just got on Facebook and I said, listen, 2 weeks to flatten the curve. We all remember that. And I just told people, let's chill out a little bit and let's see what's going on. Gosh, my district is so conservative. I had pastors, good friends calling me and they say, "Are you telling the churches to shut down?" No. I'm just encouraging everybody. Let's cool a little bit. Well, 2 weeks came and went, and all of a sudden we started hearing about executive orders. And I looked up the Illinois Emergency Management Agency Act, and I began to understand, okay, this is, I don't like this, but the governor's got 30 days.
Legislators don't do their own research. What are you talking about?
Thank you. But I did discover that Illinois law allows 30 days on it. Could be the same if we have flooding in our district. Governor Pritzker was very happy to allude to that. But 30 days came and went. And this idea of suing the governor, I'm not an attorney. And I talked to Illinois Republican leadership in the House and in the Senate and statewide, and I said, I think we need to do something here. We need to take a stand. No one in the leadership would get on board. So the idea came. I found Attorney Tom DeVore. He was ready to represent somebody. and we went to work. And finally, after Governor Pritzker was trying to, find a more liberal judge across the state on July 2nd of 2020, we won our case. And that kind of is the bedrock of what's taking place now. But finally, with these mama bears, the mothers who have stood up and said, we've had enough. We have had enough. But that's a lot of the notoriety that Cindy and I picked up for the next year and a half. As we traveled the state being invited to open up rallies, we began to realize, I don't think it's just us. I think people are tired of this. Government should never, ever, ever mandate. Government educates, government informs, government provides resources, but we the people decide what part of that. If a county, if a community, if a business wants to say you got to wear a mask to come into our business, so be it. I have a choice then whether or not I'm going to go in there. If a school board says, children, you got to wear masks, they are the duly elected government, and if I don't like it, I'm going to be at every school board meeting, expressing my frustration, and I'm going to be running for school board the next time that comes up to remove these people.
However, we also did figure out, though, through Tom DeVore, and because you found him and put the lawsuit together, we also did figure out that, masking a child is a form of quarantine for which you have to have a court order.
Thank you.
So the school boards cannot just randomly do what they want, but yet we're still fighting this issue. And as we sit here now, I looked at it. He issued another emergency order on April 1st that does not come off until April 30th.
Right.
I mean, this man is a tyrant. I mean, it's unbelievable. We're at like 26 continuous months of emergency orders by a guy who fails to let the legislature make its own decision about what this state should be doing in terms of that.
Right. And the frustrating part is, whether it was the Illinois State Board of Education, whether it was a school board, I have never talked to anyone yet that would cite to me that, no, our kids need to be wearing masks because it's healthy for them. Almost 100% of the time it was because, no, the governor says. The governor says. You go into these businesses and you saw these signs, due to the governor's orders.
Yes.
Oh, that is the most dangerous thing to a constitutional republic ever, when we let one person have that kind of power and we the people don't stand up and stand against it.
Well, to me, this is the defining issue.
Yes,
this is the defining issue. Are you going to let these people lord it over you like they literally are the lord of you? Are you going to allow that, or are you going to be an American and stand up for your individual rights? I mean, that's why we're proud to be Americans, right? We're proud of the liberties that we are imbued with, that we don't have to go to somebody to tell us what to do. And I just find it remarkable how much people have fallen for this.
We ever let this happen again, we're done as a country.
Absolutely.
Business.
This is the defining issue, in my opinion. It truly, truly is. From the vax mandates for experimental drugs to, and this is very experimental. These drugs are experimental, these vaccines, to these masking mandates. It's you have to shut down your business, and if you stand up, you got to put on your mask. If you're sitting down, you don't. I mean, it just defies all levels of common sense. One last thing. So apparently, Chicago's the murder capital of the Midwest. And the Democrats are out there spouting off that they have now, in fact, our local Democrat, and I like to bring that up, your compadre down there, State Senator Laura Ellman, who represents this part of the district, she's out there bragging that she's funding the police.
Yeah, I find that
I find
appalling.
It laughable. I find it just totally hypocritical, based off them passing HB 3653 a year ago that handcuffed the police. That many of those provisions are still extremely detrimental to our police being able to do what they want to do, or do their job correctly. Not do what they want to do, but do their job efficiently. It handcuffs them. It's a pro-criminal bill. Did they fix any of that, as they're saying that they did?
No, they didn't. So number one, the damage is done.
Okay.
Number two, this is so people. One thing I found out in government, people read headlines. Period. We have got to start doing our work into digging down into details. People see the headline, and there's many bills, and as I go around running for governor, and people ask, well, why'd you vote no on this bill? Well, let's pull it up and let's take a look at it. Headline looks awesome, but let me tell you what they tucked in here that just just makes it, unpalatable. But no, Laura Ellman, a lot of good people over there. They're scared. They're scared, and they know that because law enforcement, safe communities are the number one issue. Taxes were the number one issue when I was elected into the House, and then they came in and they destroyed and decimated our schools, and that was the number one issue for the last year or so. And now it's the safe communities. People want to be protected, and to come in and to insult us, to show us these pieces of legislation that actually do nothing. I mean, it was sitting on the Republican side of the aisle, you wanted to vote no for it. You had every reason in the world to vote no for it, but the reason we couldn't, because they had the headline. And if we would have voted no and people read the headline, it's just too much to explain yourself out of. No, this is all a dog and pony show. It is a joke. This whole budget process and everything else, the money that people are going to be given it's a farce. It's a lie. And I just pray that it doesn't sink our state.
Yeah, you have record problems retaining and attracting police officers into the positions, and we need more policing, not less policing.
Right.
And if you go to the minority communities, they will actually say that. They're on record. Their comments are recorded in the Chicago Tribune articles saying, no, we need more police. I mean, this is not a mystery.
Right, I can show you 2 pages of Republican bills that would have had real teeth, but they took our title, watered the process down, and then passed a bill
wait a
and
minute,
said, "Look."
They stole the title to your package of to your package of pro-police bills. They took your title.
As we were debating, several other of the senators would stand up and say, "Well, that's my bill. It doesn't do the same thing." But and we tried to explain that from the floor. Yeah. But again, late in the wee hours, nobody's there to listen. It doesn't make the headlines, and you never hear the story.
So I had that happen. My bills got stolen. I mean, Zalewski, whose father was under investigation too with the whole Madigan crap. Zalewski, state rep, and then he stole my bill from my property tax task force that was all about fair assessments. Yeah. And word for word, word for word. Yep. And then had the audacity to come over and ask me to sponsor my bill that you stole from me.
Yep.
So so that's what they do. Okay, well, just any final thoughts here about, why don't you give me some of your top, just give me 3 things that you think would be transformational in this state if we did.
Literally repealing the law. We are a land of law and order.
Yes.
And if we don't have someone to uphold those laws, people aren't going to feel safe and people aren't going to live here. Cindy and I have immersed ourselves in Chicago culture, and especially on the south side and the west side. As we go into the churches and we talk to people, they come to us and they tell us we've got to get on a bus or a train and go 10, 20 minutes and to go get our groceries and our pharmacies. And all the while, we're staring outside of that church at a burnout or a barred-up building across the street. And nobody's going to come and put up business because they don't feel safe. Our schools have been decimated. Teachers have quit. Teachers have left. School choice.
School choice.
So first we repeal. We get the law enforcement. We go back to where we are. We protect our men and women and give them the power that they need to do. School choice. And backing up a lot of this woke curriculum, getting CRT and the sex education out. And then we go to work on taxes. And I'm going to tell you what, here's the big thing. A lot of people say, what are you going to do about my property taxes? Yes. I really turn that around on people. I say, well, what are you going to do? Because I've served on a school board, and despite the lies of raising taxes up by 81%, an
explain
absolute
that. Could you
lie.
explain that
quick? I will. I served for 17 years on the North Clay School Board. 14 of those years, our school board did indeed ask for the levy extension. Anyone that understands levies, which they are difficult, you are asking for an advance on next year's money to be had now if your assessments in your school district have risen. If they haven't, you don't have anything. A school board can ask for up to 4.9% of additional money.
And they do it, by the way, in your suburban school districts, listeners, they do that day in and day out. And what they call it is we have to capture the growth.
Yeah,
Because if
no.
we don't capture the growth,
Yep.
we'll never get it back
Right.
again.
Nope. That's,
So anyway,
and
that's
that,
what
and
they
that
say.
is
So
damaging.
everybody does that.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
So we did it, and I have the proof
Okay.
of that the years when state government wasn't giving us our money, because the budget
And they
actually
didn't. And that's the other
That's-
thing that they never did. And I want to remind people here, the state government was very, very late in paying school districts, to the point where some of them, they had to actually go and get cash advances, so to speak, you know, in order to open up their schools in August, because the state money would never come in. They're promised a lot of money, and these rural districts do not have the massive amounts of property wealth that we have here.
Thank you.
They're running
That's it.
on a shoestring. They need that state support just to even open. And even here, they would take out in suburban schools cash advances to open up, because the state was delayed 6, 8 months, 12 months in paying them on time. That has largely kind of corrected itself.
Right.
But
right.
when you were working,
1995
go
to
ahead.
2012.
Yes,
And
okay.
so the average ask over 17 years was 2%. And every time we would go to our community and would say, guys, here's what you want to do. Do you want us to keep these teachers? Do you want us to keep this program? Because if you do, this is the cost. It usually would average maybe $5 a household every time we would make one of these asks, and the community overwhelming obviously said yes. So here's where today, Clay County and North Clay School District, the 7th lowest taxed per capita in the state. But let's take a look at Aurora and Kane County, the 3rd highest tax. So let's just kind of put that in perspective.
Yes.
But 81%, well, that's 14 divided by 17. That's 81%. So 81% of the time that I served on the school board, we did indeed ask for a levy
That's
extension.
where they got the 81%.
Yes.
What a lie.
Thank you. And they set and show these dollar amounts that we increase. You can't
What
serve
a
your full entire
lie.
life on a school board and accomplish that. So it's all these ads coming out against us are sickening, twisted lies. That's all they are. So get on my Facebook page. I explain a lot of that. You can look at that and understand the truth. Or better yet, go talk to your school board member, or go talk to your county assessor and let them explain to you how these levies work.
Well, there you have it. That is the real story with Darren Bailey. Thank you so much, Darren, for being on my podcast. I appreciate you. And everybody who's listening to this podcast, I need you to share this podcast widely with your listeners so they can make an informed choice when it comes to June 28th in the Republican primary, and then again in November. Thank you all for listening in.